Let's talk about placing dimensions in a sketch and the general dimension button. Here I am in a 2D sketch, and I'm just going to throw down a 2-point rectangle just arbitrarily on my screen here. So right now, we don't know anything about this rectangle, pretty much other than there's 90 degrees in all four corners. We don't know how big it is, we don't know where it is on the screen, and we need to place our dimensions on there in order to get that information. We do that with a button called the General Dimension button. And I'm in my Sketch tab here, and if we come along the ribbon, it's this guy right here. So he's about 2/3 of the way down the ribbon. So we use this button to place all types of dimensions on our screen. So I'm going to show you here. So let's left click to activate this. You'll notice it turns blue. Now there's 3 different ways you can place a dimension on a sketch. The first way is just to go from one line to another line, and Inventor will place a dimension between them. So for example, if I click on this vertical line on the left and I click on this vertical line on the right, you'll notice it places a dimension between those 2 lines. So I'm going to go ahead and place that up above my rectangle and change that to, let's go 2.5. Okay, so we can go from line to line. The second way we can place dimensions on a sketch is from point to point. So in this case, I'm going to dimension my vertical side here, and I'm going to do that by just clicking this little node or this little green point at the corner. So I'm going to dimension from that point to this bottom point down here, and a dimension will pop up between the 2. So we can place that one and change that dimension value. Now the third way you can place a dimension is actually just clicking a line and dragging it off of that line, and the dimension will automatically pop up for that linear length of that line. So I'm going to dimension this bottom horizontal line here just by left clicking on the line itself and dragging that off. So that one's nice and easy. It's really quick and when you're just dimensioning the length of a line. So I could place that, and you'll notice when I place this one, we get a little pop-up here. And this pop-up says, adding this dimension will over-constrain the sketch. You're going to get this little warning every time you try to place a dimension that's already on your sketch. So for example, the length of this horizontal line is already on my sketch up here because it's the exact same length as this one. So when you're trying to place a dimension that you already have, Inventor's just going to give you a little warning about that, saying, hey, you've already got this, you don't need this one. If that happens, no worries, we just hit cancel and we're good to keep moving on. Now the 2 types of the type of dimension I have on here right now, this is called size dimensions. So they're called size dimensions because they give me the actual size of my shape. I could describe this rectangle by saying it's a 1 inch by 2.5 inch rectangle, and you would know exactly what that is and how big to draw yours to match it. So those are size dimensions here. Now the other type of dimension is called a location dimension. So we learn about 2 types of dimensions, size and location. Now a location dimension tells us where our shape is located on our screen, or where it's located with reference to other shapes. So right now, this rectangle, I can drag it around left to right, I can drag it around up and down. It's not located anywhere specific on my screen. When we locate our sketches in Inventor, we locate them with reference to our center point or our origin point. It's this little yellow dot right here. So I'm going to open my General Dimension button command again. I'm going to dimension from my vertical line here on the left to that point, because remember, we can dimension by clicking lines and then points. I'm going to drag that out of my shape here, and I'm going to place that. And I could change this to whatever value I want it to be. Right now I'm going to say 1 inch. So right now this side of my rectangle is located 1 inch away from my center point. And you'll notice when I do that, my sketch turns black here. My 2 vertical lines turn black. And what that means when they turn black is that they're fully constrained. Fully constrained means that they're locked in place and that they have all of their size and location dimensions on there, so it can't accidentally change on us. Now you'll still notice that my top horizontal line and my bottom horizontal line are still purple. That's because they're not fully constrained. I can still click and drag them around on my screen here. So we need to place our location dimensions on the top side or the bottom side of our rectangle to lock it fully in place. So I'm going to click on my General Dimension button. I'm going to place a dimension between the top of my rectangle to that center point. I'm going to drag that dimension outside of our shape. We always try to place our dimensions outside of our objects so that they're not getting in the way of understanding the shape. And I'm going to change that one to 0.5 inches. Now you'll notice our rectangle has gone fully black, meaning it is fully constrained. And if I try to click and drag either line on my rectangle or any of the 4 lines on my rectangle, you'll notice that it's not moving anywhere. That's because it has all of its size dimensions, the 2.5 and the 1, and its location dimensions, the 1 and the 0.5, telling us how big the rectangle is and where it's located on my screen. Now lastly, about the General Dimension button, you'll notice as I've been placing dimensions, I've been editing those dimensions at the same time. So I place that dimension and then I tell it how big I want it to be. And my entire shape updates using that parametric modeling we've talked about. Now what if I come back in here and I decide, oh, I want my rectangle to actually be 2 by 3.5. We can just edit these dimensions by double clicking on them. So I'm going to double click on the 1 and I'm going to change that to 2 inches tall. And then I'm going to double click on the 2.5 and change that to 4.5 inches long. And you'll notice my entire sketch updates. It is still fully constrained. All my lines are black because it still has its size and location dimensions placed on here. But Inventor is really user-friendly because you can come in here and modify these dimensions at any point to change the size or the location of your object if you want to. So that's how we can use the General Dimension button for placing 3 different ways of placing dimensions, from line to line, from point to point, or simply by selecting the line, as well as how to place our size and location dimensions to make our sketch fully constrained. The General Dimension button also works for circles. If I place a circle on my screen here, to do the size dimension of a circle, we just click the General Dimension button, we select the edge of our circle, and it will automatically pop up as a diameter. So we place that, and we can type in the diameter of our circle. So this is the size dimension for my circle. Now the location dimensions of my circle, I'm going to dimension it from this vertical line here on the right to the center of my circle. And I'm going to place that dimension in and do the same thing for the top of my rectangle to the center of my circle and place that dimension on there. And you'll notice it goes fully black once I've placed my 2 location dimensions. Now you'll notice a difference here. My rectangle, I located it with regards to my origin point to center my rectangle, or actually I didn't center it, but to place my rectangle around my origin point exactly where I want it to be. For my circle, I located my circle by dimensioning it to my rectangle. And since my rectangle was fully black, fully constrained, my circle is also able to be fully constrained. So location dimensions are not always to the origin point on your screen or the center point on your screen. Location dimensions can also tell you where a hole is inside of the rectangular shape or whatever shape that hole is supposed to be in. We can also use the General Dimension button for angles. So if I draw an angle on my screen here, so I'm just going to place a line, we can click on the General Dimension button up here. And to place an angle, you need to choose the 2 lines that form that angle in degrees. So what I mean by that is if I want to know the angle from this line here to this line here, I need to select this line and then this line, and it will automatically put an angle in degrees for me on the screen here. And now I can drag this around. I could place it right up here to get the angle between these 2 on this side. I could drag my mouse to this side to get my larger angle on the other side, and so on and so forth. So you can drag your angle to wherever you want it to measure. Once you know where you want to place it, you go ahead, place it. You'll notice that it says it's in degrees in here now. It's no longer being measured in inches. And we can type in whatever angular value we want there. You can also dimension the length of non-horizontal and non-vertical lines. So again, my General Dimension button is active. I've selected it. If I want to dimension the length of this line here, which is at a 30-degree angle from the horizontal, I can left-click on this line, And now if I just drag my mouse away, I can either get the horizontal component of my line here, or I can get the vertical component of my line here. Now what if I want the actual length of this line? So I want a dimension that's parallel to this 30-degree line. To get that, you bring your mouse nice and close to the line until you get that little symbol that pops up. It's a little line and arrow that are parallel to one another. You left click when that symbol pops up, and you'll notice your dimension switches. It's no longer just a vertical or horizontal dimension. It's now parallel to that line. So then you can place this dimension and type in the length of that line. If I needed to locate this line, I can't just dimension from this line to this line and place a location in, because those lines aren't parallel, so I'm going to get an angle. Instead, we have to think, okay, we learned 3 different ways of placing dimensions. One of them was point to point. So I'm going to select my general dimension button. I'm going to dimension from the bottom point of my rectangle right here to the point where this line, the bottom of this line, where it meets this horizontal line of my rectangle. And then I can place that dimension to locate where my line actually starts. So you can get creative with how you place dimensions on your screen. You're not always just going to select the line and dimension the length of that line. Sometimes you need to get creative and go from line to point, or from point to point, or put in angles, or put in dimensions of hypotenuse or dimensions of angular lines like this. So that's how we can use the general dimension button to fully place all of our size and location dimensions on our sketch here, regardless of what the shapes are.